The disappearance of female pilot Amelia Earhart during her round-the-world air voyage back in
1937 in 1937 Amelia Earhart and her navigator, Fred Noonan, vanished without a trace, while trying to fly around the world for decades after Amelia Earhart and her navigator Fred Noonan vanish in the middle of the Pacific Ocean despite one of the most extensive search efforts in American history. No evidence of their fate was found. After 87 years of speculation, the mystery has finally taken a dramatic turn. Amelia Earhart's plane has been discovered deep under the Pacific Ocean. Neither the pilot remains or the wreckage of their plane have ever been found until last year. Where has the wreckage been all these years, and what happened to Amelia's plane? Join us as we bring answers to one of the greatest mysteries in aviation. Art did survive past her reported death in July of 1937, but under very different circumstances that would prevent her from communicating at all with the outside world. Amelia Earhart, born to touch the sky. Amelia Earhart was never meant to stay on the ground. Even before she ever set foot in an airplane, she had a spirit that refused to be tied down. She wasn't someone who followed the rules just because they were rules. She had a thirst for adventure, a hunger for the unknown. From childhood she had this unshakable belief that life wasn't about fitting into the expectations placed on her, and maybe that's what made her different, what made her destined to touch the sky and sadly die in the sky. Born on July 24, 1897 in Atchison, Kansas, Amelia was never the type of girl who played it safe while other children spent their days doing what was expected of them. Amelia was climbing trees, racing through fields, and pushing the limits of what a proper young lady should do. She had a younger sister, Muriel, her best friend, an adventure partner. The two of them weren't interested in dolls and tea parties. They wanted to build things, explore, and see how far they could go. Her breathtaking adventures will leave you completely speechless. Did you know that Amelia built a homemade roller coaster in her backyard? She and Muriel used planks, boxes, and whatever else they could find to create a track that ran off the roof of their tool shed. When it was ready, Amelia climbed up, got into her makeshift cart, and launched herself down the track. She crashed, scraped her knees, and got the wind knocked out of her butt. Instead of crying, she got up, grinning. It was just like flying, she later said. Unknown to her parents, the crash hinted at what was coming, but aviation wasn't even on her radar then. Instead, she was attracted to women who defied expectations. She kept a scrapbook filled with newspaper clippings about women who had achieved great things, doctors, athletes, and explorers. She didn't just admire them, she saw them as proof that she could do something extraordinary too. But Amelia's childhood wasn't all adventure and dreams. Life at home wasn't always easy. Her father, Edwin Earhart, struggled with alcoholism, which led to instability in the family. Then came the day that changed everything. In December 1920, Amelia and her father attended an air show in Long Beach, California. She had never really considered aviation before. Flying was still new, dangerous, and seen as something meant for men. But when she watched the plane soaring through the sky, something inside her woke. Her father paid for a 10-minute flight with pilot Frank Hawks. It was supposed to be just a fun experience, a one-time thrill, but the second the plane left the ground, Amelia knew this wasn't just fun. This was freedom. This was a purpose. According to her, it was a moment of belonging, as if the sky had been calling her all along, and she had finally answered. From that moment on, Amelia was determined to become a pilot. But wanting to fly and getting the chance were very different things. Aviation lessons were expensive, and Flight schools weren't welcoming to women, but Amelia was never one to give up. She took on odd jobs, saving every penny she could. She worked as a truck driver, a photographer, and even a stenographer, anything to earn enough for flying lessons. Finally, in 1921, she had saved enough money for her first official lesson. Her instructor was Netta Snook, one of the few female pilots at the time. Netta quickly realized that Amelia wasn't just another student. She was serious, determined, and willing to do whatever it took to master flying. She wanted to excel. Within 6 months, Amelia had saved up again to buy her plane. It was a bright yellow Aer, a small but sturdy aircraft. She named it the Canary, and she felt truly free in the air. Flying became her obsession. She practiced relentlessly, pushing herself to become better, faster, and more confident. In 1922, she set her first record, flying 14,000 foot higher than any other woman had ever gone before. But that was just the beginning. She started making a name for herself as a skilled pilot and a symbol of what women could achieve. She gave speeches, wrote articles, and encouraged other women to pursue aviation. She was flying for every woman who had ever been told she couldn't do something. By 1928, Amelia's reputation had grown, and she received a leader. Stay with us to find out Amelia Earhart's solo flight across Atlantic Ocean. It all started when George Putnam, a well-known publisher and promoter, contacted her. He had an offer that was too big to ignore. A wealthy socialite named Amy Phipps Guest had bought a plane and wanted to sponsor the first woman to fly across the Atlantic Ocean with 2 records. The first woman to fly the Pacific and the first person to fly it solo. She had planned to do it herself, but later changed her mind, deciding it was too dangerous. Instead, she wanted to find the right woman to take her place. That woman would be Amelia. The catch was that Amelia wouldn't be piloting the plane. She would be a passenger, while Wilmer Stoltz flew as the pilot, with Louis Gordon as the co-pilot and mechanic. Despite not being in control, the flight itself would be historic. No woman had ever crossed the Atlantic by air before. On June 17, 1928, the team took off from Troppach Harbor, New Land in Friendship. The journey was grueling, lasting over 20 hours. In testing their endurance, they encountered heavy fog, fierce winds, and the ever-present risk of mechanical failure. Every moment in the air was uncertain, but finally they landed in Burr, Port Wales. The crossing had been a success. Although Amelia had technically made history, she didn't feel she had accomplished much. She later admitted that she had felt like nothing more than a sack of potatoes being carried across the ocean. The fact that she hadn't piloted the plane herself left her feeling unfulfilled. The world, however, saw things differently. She was met with overwhelming love when she stepped off the plane. Reporters crowded around her, eager to capture every detail of her journey. Her face appeared in newspapers worldwide and was celebrated as a hero. A ticker tape parade was held in her honor in New York, and she was invited to the White House. Practically overnight, Amelia had become a symbol of courage and progress. George Putnam encouraged her to seize the moment. He helped her publish a book, 20 Hours 40 Minutes, in which she detailed her experiences during the transatlantic flight. She began touring the country, giving speeches and advocating for women in aviation. She even launched her line of practical yet stylish clothing for female pilots. However, despite all the attention and success, Amelia wasn't satisfied. She had received international recognition, but knew she hadn't proven herself a pilot. The world viewed her as a record breaker, but in her heart she felt the need to earn that title. She didn't want to be remembered as the first woman to cross the Atlantic as a Passenger she wanted to be remembered as the first woman to fly it alone, and what she did next shocked the whole world. Determined to make this happen, she began planning. By 1932 everything was set. She had chosen a bright red Lockheed Vega 5B for the flight, and on May 20th she climbed into the cockpit and prepared for the challenge ahead. The plan was to take off from Harbor Grace Newland and land in Paris, just like Charles Lindbergh's historic solo flight 5 years earlier. However, the journey quickly turned into a battle for survival. Almost immediately, Amelia faced relentless winds that pushed against her aircraft. As the hours dragged on, ice began forming on the wings, threatening to weigh the plane down. Then one of her instruments failed and her altimeter stopped working, so she could not know how high she was flying. Alone in the vast sky, she had to rely entirely on instinct and experience to fly safely. After nearly 15 hours in the air, she finally spotted land below. However, it wasn't Paris. Strong winds had forced her off course. Instead, she was over Ireland. Not willing to risk further trouble, she landed in a farmer field near Calmore, a small village in Northern Ireland. When a farmhand approached her, the first thing she asked was, "Where am I?" She hadn't reached her intended destination, but that didn't matter. She had done what no woman before her had ever done. She had flown across the Atlantic alone, entirely on her terms. This time there was no doubt Amelia had earned her place in history. The world erupted in celebration again, but the recognition felt different this time. She had not only matched Lindbergh's feat, but had done so under worse conditions, with no working altimeter and a far less advanced plane than his. She was awarded multiple honors, including the Distinguished Flying Cross, and became the first woman to receive a prestigious military decoration, the King of England. Flight had only deepened her desire to push boundaries further. In 1935 she became the first to fly solo from Hawaii to California, a more dangerous route than the Atlantic. Crossing the Pacific was unpredictable, with no safe places to land in an emergency. Many before for her had attempted the journey and none had succeeded, yet she did it with the same determination that had fueled her previous flights. She set records, including becoming the first woman to fly solo non-stop across the United States and completing the fastest transcontinental flight by a woman. Each of her achievements reinforced her role as a leader, not just in aviation but also in inspiring future generations. Amelia was never one to back down from a challenge, and now she was preparing for the most incredible adventure of them all, a flight around the world. But the way it ended left the whole world in tears. Amelia Earhart's final journey. We mentioned earlier that by 1937 Amelia Earhart had already shattered records in aviation, but she wasn't done. There was still one final daring challenge she wanted to conquer, to be the first woman to fly around the world. It was a mission unlike any she had taken before. It wasn't just about speed or setting a new record. This flight would test everything she had ever learned as a pilot. The journey would cover 29,000 miles, crossing the vast oceans and continents that divided the world. It was the most ambitious flight ever attempted by a female aviator, and Amelia was determined to complete it. However, she wasn't flying alone this time. Fred Noonan, an experienced navigator, would fly with her. Amelia was a brilliant pilot, but navigating the vast oceans, especially when aviation technology was still limited, required someone with Fred's expertise. Together they would have to carefully plot every course, calculate fuel usage and battle unpredictable weather. If even one thing went wrong, it could mean disaster. On June 1st, 1937, Amelia and Fred took off from Miami, Florida in a sleek twin engine Lockheed Electra. A small crowd had gathered at the airstrip watching as the plane roared to life. The wheels lifted off the ground and Amelia soared into the sky, her dream now a reality. The first leg of their journey took them south through the Americas, stopping in Puerto Rico and heading down to Brazil. Amelia had flown over oceans before, but every time she did, she understood the risk if something happened over land. There was a chance of an emergency landing, but over open water that was a different story. They flew across the Atlantic from Brazil to Senegal in West Africa. Amelia had studied the route carefully, though challenging. She and Fred successfully flew the stretch and arrived in Africa without issue. The journey then took them across the vast Sahara Desert, where Amelia looked down at an endless golden landscape. It was a strange contrast. There was so much land, yet there was no single place where they could safely land if something went wrong. They made their way eastward, stopping in Sudan and then to India. Amelia and Fred had to refuel, rest, and carefully review their plans for the next flight. At each stop, this was no ordinary trip. Each leg required absolute precision. A wrong calculation could lead them hundreds of miles off course, which could be fatal in some parts of the world. As they made their way through Southeast Asia, stopping in Thailand and Indonesia, the long hours in the cockpit began to take a toll. Amelia, however, Hawaii and back to California, completing the trip, but reaching it would be a challenge. The island was barely 2 miles long and surrounded by endless ocean. It would take precise navigation and perfect radio communication to find it. On July 2nd, Amelia and Fred took off from Lae, heading toward Howland Island. The flight was long. We are talking about 2,500 miles over open water. Unlike flying over land, where mountains, rivers, and cities could serve as visual markers, this journey would depend entirely on Fred's calculations and radio contact with the Addis, a U.S. Coast Guard ship stationed near the island to assist them. At first, the flight seemed to be going smoothly. They followed their planned course, flying steadily toward their destination, but as they got closer, things started to go wrong. Clouds gathered, making it difficult for Fred to take accurate readings. Communication with the Addis became spotty, and Amelia's messages grew more urgent. She reported that they were running low on fuel. The radio operators on the Addis tried to give her directions, but something was wrong. Amelia couldn't hear them, or they couldn't listen to her. The ship's crew sent smoke signals, hoping she would see them from the air, but there was no sign that she did. As the minutes stretched on, the situation grew more desperate. Amelia's last known transmission was tense. She reported that she believed they were close to the island, but couldn't see it. Then silence somewhere over the Pacific. Amelia and Fred were in serious trouble, but that is just half the story. Efforts to locate Amelia Earhart. Amelia Earhart had flown nearly 22,000 miles, overcoming exhaustion, mechanical issues, and unpredictable weather. Their critical refueling stop was only a few hundred miles between them and Howland Island. A short while before she went silent, the Addis received a message from Amelia that was colonized by the United States during the interwar period, reporting that she was approximately 200 m out. She sounded calm, confident. Even she gave her estimated position and stated that she and Fred were adjusting their course. The crew on the Addis prepared for her arrival, scanning the sky for the first sight of her plane. But as the minutes passed, worry began to creep in. We mentioned earlier that she sent a transmission saying she was running low on fuel. Then at 8:43 a.m. her final Confirmed message came through her on the line. 157-337. We will repeat this message. We will repeat this on 6,210 kilocycles. Wait, she sounded. Strained. The Itasca crew frantically responded, broadcasting signals back to her, but they could not tell if she could hear them. Then silence. The crew waited, hoping for another transmission. They scanned the horizon, eyes fixed on the sky, expecting to see the silver wings of her Electra breaking through the clouds. But nothing came. They continued calling out to her, sending signals, trying every frequency they could, but the silence stretched longer and longer. Something had gone wrong. The Atissa sprang into action, setting out across the water for any sign of the missing plane. They followed the coordinates Amelia had last transmitted, hoping to spot wreckage or, better yet, a floating life raft, but the plane was found there. Others thought she could have missed Howland and crash landed on a nearby island, for instance. Some thought had crashed into Niku Mororo, an uninhabited coral ATL 350 miles south of Howland. Soon after, the U.S. Navy began to receive weak radio signals. They were faint, indecipherable messages that some believed could have been Alia or Fred trying to send distress calls after her disappearance. Ham radio operators claimed to hear voices for several days. Some reports suggested that she was alive but stranded, but as days turned into weeks, the signal stopped and the leads dried up. The U.S. government spent nearly $4 million on the search, the most expensive air and sea rescue effort at the time. Ships and planes scanned the Pacific for over 2 weeks, but no wreckage, life raft, or signs of Amelia or Fred were ever found. The official search was called off on July 19, 1937, and Amelia Earhart was declared lost at sea. But for the rest of the world, the story had only begun. The fact that no wreckage was ever found puzzled everyone. How could a plane simply vanish without leaving anything behind? Mind, some debris should have surfaced, even if she had crashed into the ocean. This led to several speculations. For instance, some suggested that Amelia had run out of fuel and crashed into the sea, sinking before any searchers could find her. Remember that the Pacific Ocean is vast and strong. Ocean currents could have easily swallowed her aircraft. Another theory suggested that she had flown off course and crash landed on the Kumororo, but something interesting happened after some years. Skeletal remains were found on the island, along with items like a woman's shoe and fragments of a plane. Some researchers believe this could have been Amelia's final resting place, but no definitive proof has been established. But there were even more crazy ideas. Some people claim that the Japanese had captured Amelia, that she had survived and assumed a new identity, or that she had been on a secret spy mission for the U.S. government. Despite decades of investigation, no solid evidence was found to explain what happened, though the search ended back then. Amelia Earhart's legacy did not. Her disappearance turned her into a symbol of courage, determination, and the spirit of adventure. Her story didn't end with her last flight. If anything, it became larger than life. Books, documentaries, and countless investigations have kept her memory alive. Aviation experts, historians, and even amateur sleuths continue searching for clues, hoping to solve the mystery. But no matter what happened in those final moments, one thing is sure: Amelia Earhart was more than just a pilot. She was a pioneer. Impact on popular culture is profound, with countless books, films, and documentaries dedicated to her life and disappearance. Do you know that searching for clues to her fate has birthed several movies and books over the years? Amelia Earhart will forever be seen as a lover of adventure and the relentless pursuit of dreams, her legacy is a beacon of empowerment and resilience, reminding us that barriers can be broken and dreams can be realized through perseverance and courage. As we reflect on her remarkable journey, we honor her memory and celebrate the enduring legacy of Amelia Earhart, an icon who soared to great heights and continues to inspire generations to reach for the skies. Thank you for staying with us. What do you think happened to Amelia's plane? If you enjoyed the video, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Also click the following video on your screen and you will enjoy it.